talking Polar, the new action flick from director Jonas Åkerlund. Now, this is a Netflix movie and stars Mads Mikkelsen, Vanessa Huggins and Katheryn Winnick, who you may know from TV's The Vikings. So, what is this film about? Well, it's essentially about Mads Mikkelsen's character Duncan, who is a hitman that has worked for this particular company for like 20 years or so. And they have a kind of clause in their contract that when they hit 50, they have to retire. And they basically pay money into a kind of retirement fund, which the company then sort of has to contribute and essentially doubles it. So Duncan, the character, has been paying the maximum amount of money into his retirement fund, and he's hitting 50, and his payout is big. It's something like $8 million or something like that. And the company who is run by Matt Lucas, believe it or not, is decided they want to pay out these retirement funds and just kill off the older kind of assassins. And we see a kind of a short kind of like section at the beginning of the movie where this actually happens with someone else. So, he sends a variety of kind of people to try and kind of kill Mads Mikkelsen's character, who kind of has befriended this kind of like this local girl played by Vanessa Huggins. So that's a kind of a brief descriptor of what the plot is like. So let's kind of cut to the chase here. This one, although this is actually based off a Dark Horse comic, it's a very similar film to the kind of the modern kind of action film where we have an aging kind of like character who is a badass, who's basically sort of showing the kind of the younger guys that he's still good at. He started with Taken, and ever since then we've kind of seen more and more of these kind of like these style kind of movies sort of happen. This film has a weird mishmash of tones. So our kind of main character, played by Mads Mikkelsen, Duncan, he is kind of played very straight. He is very stoic. The violence of this movie is very graphic. So those type of things you can think of like maybe John Wick is a kind of a comparison here. However, you compare that to the rest of the movie, and everyone else feels like they're actually in a 60s James Bond film. It's such a bizarre kind of dichotomy between a very serious, stoic character, with the exception of one scene at school, and then this kind of like this weird, these cartoonish kind of villains with OTT kind of like personas and kind of outfits and stuff like that. So it has a very kind of weird mix, and I guess that's because it's coming from a sort of a comic book source. But as a film, I've got to say it's somewhat jarring. That's not to say the film was without merit, though, because I think this movie has some pretty damn good some action set pieces. I mean, Mads Mikkelsen here looks, towards the end of the film, he looks straight out of Metal Gear Solid. He'd make the perfect kind of Solid Snake, the way they've kind of done him up. He looks pretty cool, and I've got to say he's an intriguing kind of sort of character. He's very kind of, like I said, very stoic. It's very typical of what you see in these films, but nonetheless, it's a kind of a fun sort of character to watch. And our kind of like our bad guys, the younger assassins, they're all kind of like, quite flamboyant and kind of like quite fun, and the violence is very kind of like, hyper sort of stylized. It's all pretty good. There are some very kind of like some brutal torture scenes and kind of kill shots here. And I've got to say the set pieces are kind of like, they're well thought out, well choreographed. The movie looks to be made in a sort of a pretty good standard in regards to kind of like lighting and kind of like camera work and stuff like that. That was all pretty good. I thought the soundtrack was good here. And the pace of the movie is always there, I think, and it never really kind of slows down. So you never really get any kind of like boring sections. And there are some kind of neat times here where we have some kind of some characters from different kind of countries speaking in their native tongue, which always I prefer, rather than kind of having foreign characters speak in English with the foreign accent, stuff like that. So what doesn't work for me? So like I said, the mishmash of tones for me, I feel would be the most jarring thing. You might be able to get over that, but it's almost like if you put John Wick in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. It's just such a weird kind of like little sort of different two sort of styles. There's lots of cameos in this film and supporting roles from recognisable actors. So I've mentioned, obviously, you've got Matt Lucas, who's well known in the UK for kind of like, for a variety of kind of like comedy sort of characters here. US audiences might not be as familiar with him, but again, he's playing like this weird comedic sort of character that is just OTT. But you've also got cameos from Richard Dreyfuss, you've got one from Johnny Knoxville, and then we have our supporting characters, our female characters. Katheryn Winnick as a kind of like the second to top bad guy, completely wasted. Now I've got a feeling in this movie she either is sitting down or walking very slowly. They're the two things that she does. She doesn't do anything. So she's obviously got some kind of notoriety now because of Vikings. And I feel people would be interested in watching her in a kind of in movies, but she is just so weighted in this movie. I mean, her character I felt would have been one of the most nuanced, because she is a bad guy, but it's hinted at least she has some type of reservations about maybe going after Duncan in this, and that would have been nice to have seen that played up a bit more, and a bit more recognised in the fact that she's maybe a bit conflicted and she's not just kind of like a scenery chewing kind of bad guy, but it's really only a hint. It doesn't kind of really factor into the story anyway. And again, she's just there to kind of look cool, have all kind of like funky costumes, walk from one place to the other and sit down and then say some stuff, but she doesn't really have much impact on the plot. And really the same thing can be said for Vanessa Huggins. Now, she does have a kind of a fairly important role in the film, but not right to the very end. One of the things I felt didn't work about this film is that we're meant to believe Mads Mikkelsen's character has this kind of bond with her and is protective over her, kind of like, you know, a father sort of daughter kind of relationship. Now, it doesn't feel like that. To me, it doesn't. It's not as developed as it could have been. Now, when we get to the end of the movie, there's a big revelation about Vanessa Hudson's character. But prior to that point, I just didn't see why he was that kind of like really kind of protective over her, because we never really felt that relationship built that much within the film. You know, he spoke to her a couple of times, but that was really it. I didn't really feel the connection there, the kind of chemistry between the two of those. So that was it just seemed a little bit kind of undeveloped for me. The other thing is, I've got to say, this is based off a comic book, so I feel some people can overlook this stuff. But to me, some of the plot points here didn't make sense to me. So we have a company that specialises in hitmen that take out anyone, and they're worried about people and their contracts. So they're saying, you know, we contracted, we've got to pay, he's got to be dead by his 50th birthday, or we are contracted to pay him all this money. I thought, hang on a second, your company is based on hitmen, which is not legal, so I don't think contracts are going to be legally binding in this kind of scenario. I don't think anyone's going to be going to court over this, so I don't understand really why you're worrying about it. So it's a bit of a glaring kind of issue. Like I've said, people might just think that, oh, who cares? It's based on a comic book movie. It's kind of like not realistic. Who cares? But you know, it bothered me a little bit, if I'm honest. But like I said, going back to the tones here, it's just a very kind of like odd kind of like mishmash of styles here. I mean, some people, it works to a certain degree. I mean, we have these kind of like these flashy kind of like, you know, name kind of like things that sort of come up, and all of our kind of like gang of bad guys are all radically different from another, and they have some kind of like, you know, some kind of like interesting scenes and stuff like that. But even then, it doesn't kind of, you know, I question the kind of the mindset. So we have this company has been killing every kind of older employee that they've got who hits 50. Yeah, our newer, younger kind of like assassins are quite happy to do that. Do they not think when they hit 50 they're going to get the same fate? Again, there's just plot holes here that kind of bother me a little bit. So, if you don't think about this movie too much, I feel you can enjoy it on a kind of a well-made action level. Because there's lots of kind of like well shot action sequences and kind of like cool gunfights and stuff like that. One other thing actually, so towards the end of the film, Mads Mikkelsen goes into the bad guy's lair. Again, very kind of 60s James Bond. And there seems to be hundreds of like generic kind of like foot soldiers, all in kind of little uniforms and stuff like that. And it's just like, man, It gets a little bit boring then because you're just fighting nameless guys who are never going to pose a threat. And it just, there seems to be a lot of them. I thought, this has got to be a huge kind of organisation to have this kind of stuff. Anyway, there you go. Whatever. For me, it was a 5 out of 10. It is a good film in regards to some well-made, exciting action set pieces. But there's just some things here that bothered me. So I'm going to knock it down to bits. But if you just want to watch it at a purely surfacey level, it's worth a watch. So 5 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.